Hello everybody and welcome back to another not applicable Formula 1 video. I hope that you're well. I hope you are ready and raring to go for the business end of the season. We are currently 8 races away from finding out who is going to be the World Drivers' Champion in 2021. As it stands, Red Bull are behind Mercedes in the Constructors' Championship, but Max Verstappen has a 5-point lead on Lewis Hamilton when it comes to the Drivers' Championship. It's going to go all the way to the wire. Those two are going to switch places continually throughout these last 8 races. But I was thinking to myself, if I'm Max Verstappen, I've got this week before Russia. What could I do? What could I set up mentally in my own mind and be prepared for these last 8 races and guarantee myself my first ever World Drivers' Championship and make sure that Lewis Hamilton does not get that record-breaking 8th title? And there was 5 things that came to mind that I think Max Verstappen could do or change when it comes to these last 8 races to just guarantee a little bit more success and possibly even more points than he would have gained so far this season. The first of all, I think that the Red Bull package has been the better of the 2 cars. I think we're looking from Spain up until now, Spain-Monaco up until now. The Red Bull package generally has been the faster package, and Max Verstappen has looked like the better overall driver this season, in my opinion. But what he has lacked a little bit is patience. You know, when Max goes wheel to wheel with Lewis, we've seen every single time they go wheel to wheel, there is a touch, there's a nudge. And for me, it comes down for Max Verstappen being all-out attack. And it's something that we love about Max Verstappen. But for these last 8 races, for knowing that you've only got 8 races to win this championship, I think he could do with just being a tiny little bit more patient. I know that all-out attack has worked for him. You know, we look back to Imola. Imola, he went all-out, attacked Hamilton as much as he possibly could, got past and got the win very easily. But then there's other races. I'm thinking Bahrain right at the beginning of the season when he had to give the place back to Hamilton. Because for me, he just went a lap or two too early. He went for the gap because it was slightly there. Whereas if he'd have gave it a lap or 2, I reckon the door would have been completely open and he'd have easily been able to get past Hamilton. He would have won that race. Silverstone as well. And now this is going to be very controversial because I know that lots of people blame Lewis Hamilton for the Silverstone incident. I personally think it was a bit 50-50. But in terms of Silverstone, I think Max Verstappen could have done with letting Lewis Hamilton have the place, even if it was just in that corner, and trying to get it back later on. You know, spinning out of the race like that and losing a possible 18, 15 points was so detrimental overall in the season. And it's something that we've seen Lewis Hamilton do. He plays a little bit of the longer game. I think Max Verstappen could take a little bit of a leaf out of that book, be a tiny bit more patient. And we've seen, you know, they've come together in Monza again here. And luckily, both cars were out of the race in that case. Again, if Verstappen would have been the one that lost out and Hamilton would have gone on to continue and finished on the podium, again, we'd be looking at these guys the other way around in the Drivers' Championship. The second thing for me kind of stems from that. It's being a little bit more consistent. Lewis Hamilton just does not DNF. His DNF in Monza was the first in 63 races. Lewis Hamilton has got consistency beyond belief. Whereas if you look at this season, Verstappen already has 3 or 4 DNFs in various different races. A couple of them haven't really been his fault, and a couple of them, again, come down to that inconsistency in his racing, that wheel-to-wheel battling, and sometimes going for a gap that might not be quite there, in my opinion. Max has won 7 of the races so far this season, whereas Lewis Hamilton has only won 4. But he's so consistent. Lewis Hamilton is always in and amongst it. He's always near enough at the top of the grid. He's always on the podium whenever Max is there too. And it's that inconsistency, those crashes, the fact that Max Verstappen does have those DNFs, which again is going to cost him. He cannot afford to have another DNF in these last 8 races. He needs to find that consistency. He needs to finish every single one of these races, because I think Lewis Hamilton will finish every single one of these races and will be in and amongst the podiums every single time. The next thing that he can do is learn from previous years. We've seen what Lewis Hamilton does when it comes to the end of a season. We've seen him battle with Rosberg. We've seen him battle with Vettel. We've seen how he reacts towards the end of a season when he's in a fairly close title fight. And we can learn from that. I think of Vettel in 2017, 2018. I know that Ferrari kind of faded away after the summer break, and Mercedes just effectively found a couple attempts after the summer break and they obliterated from then onwards. But again, there was little mistakes. And Red Bull, in my eyes, are the better package than Mercedes this year. I don't think you could say that about the Ferrari of Vettel. And Verstappen needs to learn from that, use that to his advantage. Seb made mistakes. And more importantly, the Ferrari car fell off a little bit when it came to that. Max Verstappen has to have pure, unadulterated faith that the Red Bull team and the Red Bull garage can carry him to this title. He needs to keep working with the team. He needs to keep adapting the car because Mercedes do have an ability to just find 2/10 and just click into gear, especially when it comes to the business end of the season. There's a reason they've won so many Constructors' Championships over and over and over again. They can find that. And Red Bull need to be able to find that too. So he needs to learn from those mistakes from previous years, from Ferrari, from the likes of Rosberg before 2016, and use what they didn't. Take that next step and beat Lewis Hamilton to this title. And on top of that, talking about the team, he needs to help out Sergio Perez. Now, this is very difficult for Max Verstappen to do. I don't know what kind of dynamic him and Perez have. They seem to get on fairly well. But he needs to try and edge Perez on if he can. Whether that's, giving Perez information on the car or the track or a tow in qualifying. I know that we saw in Monza, Perez give the tow to Verstappen over and over and over again. If Max would have just done it once and Perez could have been just slightly higher than 9th, given them an option to battle with the Mercedes, it comes back to that Constructors' Championship. The reason that Red Bull are dropping away from Mercedes is not because of Max Verstappen. It's because of that difference between Bottas and Perez. And Perez needs to be there if Max Verstappen does make an error or there's a mistake. He needs to be there to help out Max Verstappen when it comes to these title fights, when it comes to getting on the podium. If that's a second place instead of Hamilton getting second place, taking those 3 points off of Hamilton at this point in the season would be massive for Max Verstappen and massive for Red Bull as a team. He needs to try and drag Perez up in any way that he possibly can. He needs to help out in races too. He needs to make sure that Perez gets the best possible opportunity to get up and amongst it with him at the front of the grid. Because Hamilton is going to have Bottas there. Hamilton is always going to have Bottas, that teammate, that consistency that Bottas has. And we even saw it in the Netherlands where Bottas, started to weave in front of Verstappen a little bit, tried to hold him up a little bit. We haven't really seen that from Perez yet this season. And if Max Verstappen can have that in these last 8 races, it's just going to tip him over the edge. It's going to be that tiny little factor that pushes him that little bit further. The final thing that comes to mind with Max Verstappen is he needs to deal with the pressure. Now, we've seen cracks already in this title fight. It's going to go all the way down to the wire. The pressure is going to mount and mount and mount. Every single weekend, it is going to get closer and closer and closer to breaking point for Max Verstappen. And we've seen cracks. I think back to Hungary, after Silverstone, after the crash, he was livid. And I think the summer break came at the absolute perfect time for Max Verstappen because he'd had Silverstone where he'd crashed out. He'd continued been asked in the media about it. And those cracks started to form. Then he had Hungary where he was crashed into at the start of the race. Again, Hamilton is able to make up points. And Max Verstappen ends up outside of the points with what was a pretty lackluster performance, not down to him, but due to the fact the car had so much damage, he couldn't drag it up the grid any further. We don't want to see those cracks again. He hasn't got another summer break. He's not going to have a summer break after this Monza crash, and the media is going to be all over this over the next 2 weeks. As soon as he gets to Russia, the first question he is going to be asked is about that Monza crash. And we need to make sure that he doesn't have those cracks that we started to see in Hungary. Because everybody, everywhere, especially with the 3 grid place deduction that he's got, is going to be asking about Monza. Overall, for me, I think Max Verstappen has got this on the lock. The biggest battle is with himself. whether he can deal with that pressure, whether he can learn from previous mistakes, and whether he can have the consistency over these last 8 races to keep picking up those points, to keep picking up wins, and become a World Drivers' Champion. Overall, for me, at this point in the season, Max Verstappen has the advantage. He's got the better of the 2 cars overall this season. He's got more race wins. He's got more confidence in that car, in my opinion, than Lewis Hamilton does. What do you think, though? Do we think Max Verstappen can become a World Drivers' Champion? What do you think he needs to do to make sure he can guarantee it? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you next time.